in general, there is this continual shift from people not sharing as much. People do not share the same amount of content with as many people as they did 10 years ago.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of The Influence Factor by the Influencer Marketing Factory. Today with me we have Navarra, that is a well-known social media consultant and also an industry analyst. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I invite you to subscribe to our channel so that you can get notified for new episodes. Enjoy the show. Hey Matt, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. I'm just about to head off on holiday, actually. So I'm about to kind of finish off all my activity on social and go on a bit of a digital detox if I can manage to do it, that is.
Do you think it's going to be easy as a task for you that you basically live on social media?
Well, I always say every holiday when I go away that I will kind of completely sort of stop using social media. And to be honest, each year that goes by, I get a little bit better at it. But I think I'll have a good chance of being successful. I've been more than enough busy with threads and everything else that's been going on. So I hope to take a good break.
Okay, nice. It's not easy. I know myself. I know, like, it's all the time. It's like I'm gonna use that a bit less, maybe, but sometimes little notification here. You want just to check on something. So
Exactly.
I feel you. But why don't you tell us like a bit more about yourself, right? Because you're quite unique, right, in your space. When it comes to like the news and social media, you're like a very specific angle. So why don't you tell a bit more about yourself? How did you even go like on social media and doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, I think it's quite a good, quick summary there in terms of being unique, because I always have difficulty trying to describe what I do because I'm a bit of everything. I do the consultancy bit, which I speak to brands and help them with social, and I do a bit of news media, journalism-y stuff. I'm on TV or radio talking about social, and I do sponsored content as well. So there's that kind of stuff as well. And I speak at events. And I do and I create stuff. I create my own newsletters. So I'm not really one specific thing. I'm not a out and out creator. I'm not a fully fledged speaker or fully fledged consultant. I'm a bit of everything. But in terms of my entry into social, I started, my first job in social media was in 2009. So I was a press and media kind of comms manager for a government department in Cardiff. And I was meant to be doing press releases and writing scripts for speeches for different ministers in government. And at the time, social media was, really starting to take off in sort of 2008, 2009 onwards. And they didn't have any Facebook account or Twitter account. And I decided that would be a thing that I would kind of take on because I was already interested in social in some degree anyway, outside of work. But also I was kind of the guy who was the default geeky guy in the office. If there's an IT problem, Matt will fix it. He knows what he's doing. So I took up the role of doing it. My boss didn't really want me to be doing it. It wasn't what my job was, what I was paid to be doing. And had some success early on with a relationship we built up with a TV show called Dragon's Den, which I think in the US would be called Shark Tank. Mm-hmm. We did a collaboration with them, and it was very successful. And then I decided around this time that I also had lots of challenges in my career. Up to that point, not knowing what to do, and also upsetting every single boss that I'd had. So at the same time as kind of social media bits were taking off for me, I was having problems with work as well. So I discovered through a period of assessments and some counselling sessions I went to that adult ADHD was at the root of a lot of the problems. And after trial and error with some of the medications, it had great success. And suddenly my career kind of took off. And I think like the kind of the point that was the turning point for me was when I emailed a director of digital in London who was somebody who was senior in government, didn't know me. I decided I'd write them an email, sort of kind of begging really that I loved social media and my boss wasn't keen on me doing it, but would they be interested in kind of mentoring me or helping me out? And for whatever reason, they took pity on me. And the long story short is they asked me to come to London, and I spent a few months working for the Cabinet Office. And then I spent some time working for the Prime Minister in Downing Street doing social. And then it kind of took off from there. And that was my kind of entry route into social media. But that was just the beginning, because of course I did a lot before I got to the point where I am now, which is as a independent consultant.
Fantastic how like one email sometimes can basically change, right? The journey of your life. Was it like something just improv, like that you said, let's just do it, if they don't get back to me, whatever, but You just went with it?
Well, I was always the sort of person that kind of wasn't too afraid of kind of trying something new or doing something that maybe other people wouldn't do. And maybe it's partly to do with my ADHD and kind of not having sort of recognizing social norms and social etiquettes, that I kind of just didn't really care what anyone thought of me. I was just going to ask anyway. So I sent hopefully an eloquent or well articulated email to this person in London who I'm still friends with to this day. And I'd imagine that I, spelled out what I was good at, what I wasn't so good at, what I thought I could offer them, and what my request was. And as I say, they kind of agreed to help me out. And so I spent a period of time doing that social role in London and with with Downing Street, which of course from my LinkedIn profile and my CV looked pretty good. It was always good to have a picture of yourself outside number 10. That helps kind of make people think maybe this guy knows a little bit something. And then from there, I kind of got headhunted to work for the Next Web, which is a technology news and events company based in Amsterdam. I was their head of social and the boss at the time. And then a good friend again, a guy called Boris. He's on Twitter as @Boris, not the Boris from previous days of COVID. Don't worry, it's not him. But he was very good because he just said to me from day one, do what you want. And we know that you know your stuff. These are the very limited boundaries that we have for you, and don't ask for permission, just ask for forgiveness and get on with it and do the job. And that level of autonomy and independence and creative freedom meant that I had quite a lot of success in that role over the 5 years I was with them. I think we generated, one of my roles was to look after the social media output and strategy for their conference, TNW conference, which when I joined was 3,000 attendees over a single day. By the time I left, that event was 25,000 attendees over 2 days. And I had to hire first time I did it in the first year, it was just me sort of live tweeting. And then by the final year, in the 5th year, it was a team of about 16 of us. We generated, I think, around 850 million social media impressions in 7 days for the event. So quite a dramatic shift. So that role taught me quite a lot. And because in that role, I suddenly got more interested in the kind of technical aspects of social media in terms of what was going on with the latest features in the app. And I would start going in the app and checking out all the latest things. And you get those little bubbles that come up and say, this is a new feature. And you go, oh, that's really cool. And I'd start screenshotting them and tweeting out saying, I've got this new feature. That's a GIF feature on Facebook. Have you got that? And it's sort of snowballed from there. Other people realized that all seemed to be interested in it. So I did it more and more. And then I started noticing that every time I posted a new feature or something about a social platform and it hadn't been mentioned elsewhere, then BuzzFeed and TechCrunch and The Verge would kind of use my tweet in an article. And suddenly I thought, well, that's free marketing. That's easy. I could do this all day. So no one else was doing it at the time. There weren't any other types of people that do it, and lots of them do it now. And so that kind of got me quite a substantial following in a very short space of time. And then I did one media appearance because somebody in the office didn't want to go on TV and they asked for a tech expert to go on TV. And I did it. And they seemed to like what I'd done. And so then they kept calling. So by the time I came to the point where I wanted to become a freelance social media consultant, which kind of I'd reached the peak of my job in the next web, I knew I had to move on. And I decided that the best move was to go freelance, which was really scary. I had built up a following on Twitter. I'd had a sort of an audience on LinkedIn, and I'd been on TV and radio a little bit. And I'd also done that role at Downing Street. So combining all of those elements together, when I kind of springboarded into say, right now I'm free to work for anybody, it was fairly straightforward to get clients. And I was quite fortunate with that that was my opening into the world of freelance social media.
Hello. Is your brand ready to amplify its reach? Well, the Influencer Marketing Factory is here to do just that. We are a global influencer marketing agency helping brands ignite their growth, from influencer identification to campaign strategy, handling legalities and agreements to managing shipping and logistics. We have it all covered. We work with hundreds of brands across different verticals, from Fortune 500 companies to DTC brands. And we don't just stop there. With detailed ROI analysis, we help brands like yours measure success, transforming impressions into actionable conversions. You can find us at the influencermarketingfactory.com or just search the Influencer Marketing Factory on Google.
Fantastic. And congratulations on what we built so far. And, again, we said, you went from, typical, maybe, company, you work 9 to 5 to go more on yourself as freelancers and so on. So a couple of questions for you on that. How did you build your personal branding? Was it like strategized behind that? Was it a bit random? Was it a combination? Because some people are very like, they put everything down and gonna, well, this is my goal for my best personal branding. I'm gonna have this calendar, like every day I'm gonna do this and that. Other people are like, you know what? I just start posting and then a snowball effect, it goes there. What was your approach in that?
Yeah, well, I think initially in the first, so when I was at the Next Web and I was just deciding to go freelance, and I kind of had this following on social media, and I knew that people were interested in these new features that I was finding and sharing, and they were getting featured in articles. I knew that I wanted to go freelance at this point, but I kind of didn't have any idea about a company name, or there was no Geek Out, which is my kind of newsletter, and everything else that I do wasn't a thing at this point, and I hadn't even considered that. It was just, I'm going to go freelance. I'm going to trade as, myself, Matt Navarra, and I will just tell people through my Twitter account and LinkedIn that I'm now kind of available, and see what happens. And so that there wasn't a lot of kind of strategy beyond that. I did do a lot of research in terms of, spoke to a lot of people in the industry that I'd made connections with over the years and sounded them out about my plans and what I was thinking of doing, and seeing if they could give me a sense check of what I was doing was the right thing. And I had a lot of positive feedback from that. But beyond that, there wasn't at that point any strategy at all. And then when I went, launched myself as being available freelance in the first few months, I was really, I guess, a bit of luck and a good timing and a little bit of judgment as well. But I had quite a lot of interest. So it quite quickly got my first clients without too much hassle. But then beyond that, I started to think, well, I'm doing all these things, maybe need to kind of put some name to it and kind of make it a bit more professional and organized. And because of my ADHD, I find that aspect quite hard. Being organized, planning and organizing are not my strengths. So I actually had a Facebook group that I hadn't launched anything within the Next Web, and I hadn't done anything with it. It was kind of a dormant group, and I decided that, well, that I'm allowed to take it because there was nothing been going on in it. I took it away and then kind of thought, well, what could I use this for? And I thought, well, maybe I could create a community around social media managers, but it needs a name. And I was just scrolling through Facebook one day at Facebook groups, other groups that were similar. And then I went into a completely different area of Facebook of groups that were not related to social media. And this group popped up that was dormant and then wasn't being, it was abandoned. And the name was something Geek Out. And I thought, Geek Out, that sounds, geeks, Geek Out, it kind of struck me as being quite a good name. So, well, I'll go with that. That was about as sophisticated as it got in terms of coming up with the name Geek Out. And I added that to the Facebook group, and that became the starting point. So there wasn't a huge genesis in the branding at all. And then I had a couple of friends in the industry who were good at design work, and they kindly offered to kind of mock up some kind of sort of Geek Out branding for me, and also my own website. They kind of made a logo for me into some of the stuff. So all of that was kind of fairly organic. And then when I decided to launch a newsletter, because people were saying, we're doing all these tweets and all of these posts, but could you not just pull it together and make it easier for us? And I'm like, well, I could, but I need to make some money out of this, because otherwise the time I'm spending putting it together for you every week is not going to be, it's not going to give me anything back, and I'm going to have to take time away from clients. So I pulled together the idea for a newsletter, and around the same sort of time at the podcast as well, because that were both newsletters and podcasts at the time were kind of becoming a bigger deal. So I sort of put out, I think I literally put out a tweet about both of them at different points during one particular year in 2018, 19 or something like that, and saying, I'm going to do a newsletter, would anyone be interested, or I'm going to do a podcast, what would you like me to kind of do in the podcast? And both of them had direct messages from companies that I recognized, saying, are you accepting sponsors and advertisers? Would you kind of, would you be interested in an advertiser sponsor? And so then it became quite tricky, because I didn't have any clue, no experience of negotiating sponsorship and advertising deals for myself, let alone for anybody else. And because that wasn't what my work was about. So it was a very, very steep learning curve in this, and certainly happy to go into some funny stories around those negotiation points in the beginnings of kind of starting Geek Out.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And still talking about social media, and you said like podcast and newsletter and everything, like you are busy, right, on social media. So before getting to the next questions, I'm very curious, how many hours do you spend like per day on social media, so different ones? And also, when a new app goes out, what is your typical day? Like, do you just stay 24 hours up on it to find all the different bugs, all the different things, new features, anything like that? You take some breaks. Like, what is it your typical day during, again, normal week and when a new app goes out?
Yeah. So in terms of my typical usage of social media, Monday to Friday, it's in line with obviously my working day and what I'm doing in work. So I have kids, so I do the usual things like everybody else. I've got school run. It's all 8, 7, 8, 9 in the morning is all about the kids. And then once I'm back here, sat here I am now at my desk, I typically have my Chrome browser's got about 25 tabs that are open to the tools that I use most frequently. Looking at it now in front of me, I have things like, TweetDeck is open. I have my newsletter tool, Beehive. I have Feedly as my RSS feeds, a whole host of other tools sat here as well. And my kind of typical routine, at least Monday to Thursday, because Friday is slightly different, is checking my email, first of all, replying to those. Takes me about half an hour or so. And then it's probably spending a good hour to hour and a half looking at Feedly. And I've got probably about 300 RSS feeds, which over in a 24-hour period will generate, if I haven't checked it since the night before, could have 1,000 to 2,000, unread items from different publications. And over the years of working for the Next Web, which was part of the role, was also sourcing ideas for news stories in tech for the Next Web. I've kind of got skill at kind of quick skim reading and sort of finding and using the filters in there to filter down. I just want social media stories, and then figuring out which of these are the most important ones or which ones have I not shared anywhere, and then spending a good hour and a half posting them onto Twitter, post them into my WhatsApp community for Geek Out Pro, and compiling them ready for me to do something else with. So that's what, and I do that particular activity probably twice or 3 times a day, which is, so almost 50% of my time is reading news and sharing news content and commentating on that stuff. And then the other parts of my day, the second half of my day typically is broken down by client calls. If I'm recording a podcast or speaking at an event, or if I have a media request, which, when Threads launched, for example, everything went out the window because it was, I think I did some like 12 or 15 radio interviews and 10 or 15 live TV interviews for news companies around different countries around the world. And so I kind of pause on some stuff and kind of get on and do that instead. And then I deal with the ad hoc stuff that comes out on as well. And then Fridays are different because Fridays I write the newsletter. So Thursday night I prepare the newsletter. Friday I spend working with my co-editor Martin Bryant, and we put the newsletter together. And then we get it out we aim to get out by lunchtime UK time on a Friday. So there's a lot, as well as the ad deal, people asking to do sponsored posts on my channels and asking to do ads in the newsletters, and a whole host of other things. It's pretty hectic.
I can imagine that. Even just whenever I see your newsletter, there's so many links in each different categories. I'm like, it's difficult for me to skim it. I cannot imagine for Matt just to create these. So congratulations on that, because it's a lot of work. And since you mentioned that, like you said about Threads, right? So now that we're recording, we're in a moment where they got, there are 100 millions of users, but they're already saying that, let's say that the hype went down already, and there are just some 10 of millions of people still active. But of course, I also saw it myself, the engagements, it's normal, right? They went down after, that is normal. What is your impression so far about Threads? So from the first week to now that we're recording.
Yeah, so I think my initial reaction was kind of what I said in a tweet on the day it came out, which was that I thought it was good. I thought it was very good, and I was really impressed by it. And I think I wasn't the only one who felt that way. I think because the sheer volume of people that went there and really engaged heavily for that first few weeks, like you would do with any major new platform from a big company like Meta. I was all over it. So I spent probably that first week in the app, 3 or 4 hours across the day, every day. I was using it more than I was using Twitter, which is typically my most dominant platform that I use. And I did a lot similar to what most people do, but maybe slightly different from the average user, but maybe certainly similar to other social media managers and people who work in social, which is digging into different what the brands are doing on there, seeing what creators are doing, trying out the different features, kind of spotting where the opportunities could be, what the issues they're gonna face with making the app successful, and then trying to figure out how it fits into the wider social media ecosystem? Is it something that I can see displacing something else, or is it going to be complementary to other activities? And so there's a whole activity of that going on. But certainly now we're kind of a couple of weeks in, my usage is, like most people, has dropped off. I've started to see some of the things that I'd like to have improved on the platform, and I certainly can see that there is still a great deal of opportunity, and I think it will be a successful platform. It's just still too early to say how successful it will be, but we're going to find that out, I guess.
If there was like a feature that it's missing on Threads right now that you would love to have like today, what would that be?
Well, the main one I think most people would agree needs is the chronological feed. If it's going to be a sort of a platform for real-time text-based social, much like Twitter is, I think that's fairly important, and I think we'll see that fairly soon from what we're hearing from people working on the platform. I think that search and discovery and trending, trending tab of some description would be very useful. Ability to have a desktop version for people that work professionally with social media to be able to kind of plan and schedule content. So, an API will be useful as well. And then I think for creators and advertisers, it's going to be, an ad platform and the, branded content, sponsored content sort of features, which again, they have already talked about and said will, start to come onto the platform in the coming months.
And if on the one hand, right, we have Threads that is under Instagram, that is under Meta, right? On the other side, we have TikTok, right? We all know that, during the, Trump administration, there was this potential TikTok ban, did happen. Now with, Biden administration, it's under scrutiny again. What do you think that is going to happen there? I know that it's very difficult to say. There are so many different things, but based on the news, like, again, you said you read so many news on, I guess, tons of publications, so different tone of voices, different angles, different perspectives. What is your impression on that? Like, what do you think is going to happen? It's just another, TikTok ban Threads and never is, or actually maybe because it's, there is a lot of things happening in social media and everything with China, actually it's going to happen.
Maybe. In terms of the US and TikTok, I think that we may see more states ban TikTok or say they're going to ban TikTok, and then a period of legal challenges from the company itself and from creators and others that, oppose it will be seen. It wouldn't be completely shocking to discover that they have a nationwide ban of some description in the coming year. The pressure is still being put on the administration in the US to kind of instigate a ban. Behind the scenes, companies like Meta, I'm sure, are pulling different strings and levers to try and make that happen, because that will certainly benefit them if that was to happen. I think that there'll be a period of reconciliation where there'll be some sort of negotiation, because I think the scale, size, and the economic benefits and values to the US economy, but also to the creator economy, is too great for it to be completely banned, and that's the end of the story. And also there's this huge geopolitical stuff that goes on between those countries, and I'm not an expert in that stuff, so I wouldn't want to go too far into that. But certainly I think there is every chance there will be some further bans, but then I think it will be a period where it will be figured out, and it will be back online. But it's great to see now, like with Threads, although Threads is not a direct competitor to TikTok in any way, having another platform in the mix, as much as it's a nightmare for social media managers, I think it makes the space a lot more competitive to some degree. And certainly for Twitter, Twitter's needed a direct, rival for some time to kind of get it to change its ways, but also to give people, a valuable alternative given the upset that we've seen with Elon Musk recently.
And since you just said rival, right? So being rivals on social media in the past, maybe 10 years ago was different, but in the past, 5 years, basically all social medias are trying to get the attention of users. They are crawling features, they are copying each other's stuff. So again, you cover so many features in the past years. I wanted to ask you, what is working, what is not working, if you have noticed any patterns, and also, are we missing out anything, or are social media should maybe stop in creating new features and maybe focus on something else? What is your opinion on that? Because it's happening a lot. At the same time, nothing is happening sometimes.
Well, yeah, we certainly know that all of the platforms at some point in time are guilty of a copy paste, a kind of cloning of a feature. When someone creates something that we see as a format that is popular and useful and people see the value in, then we'll quite quickly see it across most of the platforms. Stories is a classic example of that. And we've seen it with Be Real, which is the most recent one I can think of as well, that people clone that feature and stuff. So that's just how the industry works. I think it makes fun headlines, but Meta maybe does it more than others. I would say arguably it does it better than others in terms of taking something, putting it out on a new platform to get it appealing to a larger audience, and then improving upon it. I think they've done that very well with a lot of things, and some people like that, some people don't. I think in terms of social media as a whole, in terms of features and functions and changes, it's a weird time to be a social network at the moment. The platforms are all kind of changing into some degree, and the way that we use social media and what we expect and need from social media is also changing. And we've got so much going on in the background as well. Things like AI, generative AI. We've got things like the Metaverse, and stuff to do with AR and VR. We've got things to do with people's decision to want to share less publicly, but share more in private communities and groups and forums and in ephemeral kind of ways. And also, we've got this backdrop of regulation and privacy and a history of social media platforms using and sometimes abusing our data and things. So all of this stuff is going on, and at the same time, these platforms are trying to kind of figure out what's going to happen next. And what we are seeing certainly is a splintering of platforms. People are using a greater number of apps and moving more of their social media activity towards messaging type activities and private chats and private groups and communities. That's certainly a shift we've seen for a number of years. And that's why you'll see a lot of the platforms are sort of giving people more of those sorts of features. Certainly Instagram, you see lots of stuff to do with broadcast channels and group chats and features that add to DMs and private sharing with your close friends and things. So I think that's a lot of what's been is going on. And then the other stuff as well is the commerce piece. Well, the thing that the platforms are really keen on is kind of joining up advertisers and creators and retailers and all of them together to kind of siphon off new revenue streams, and also try and make internet shopping or social media shopping a thing which up until this point it really hasn't been particularly successful, and we're still seeing all of the platforms trying different things to make that happen.
And you mentioned many keywords and buzzwords, right, that I liked, and I would like also to expand on them, right? And the first one that you said, it was about generative AI. Everyone is talking about it, of course, like in the past months, between generative and also like optimization through AI. So many new tools. Some are with their own IP, many others are basically just based on OpenAI and so on. But of course, like social media are already integrating and implementing AI in different ways. My only main concern sometimes it is about, especially for generative, is that you might lose as a content creator your own tone of voice, right? People follow you because of your style, because of your format, and sometimes when you write with AI, you can clearly see that it's AI, right? So what do you think that might be some of the maybe new features from social media, again, that can help creators, but without removing their identity as content creators?
I think the concerns and the fears of generative AI in terms of the typical fears are taking someone's job and it's going to do all the work for us, and we're not going to have a career in social media if it does this, or that it's going to produce all this really awful content, and we're going to suddenly have all these feeds of platforms filled with this kind of generic-y automated content which no one really wants, and amongst many other kind of concerns people have. And I don't think any of those are actually how it will play out, and we'll start to see that over the coming years. But people, first of all, we know that algorithms are very good at now knowing what we want, and what we like and what we engage with. And if we see stuff that we think is not particularly engaging and is very generic and bland, whether it's because it's AI generated or otherwise, then you're not going to see less of it because it will be picked up that you're not engaging with that stuff. Mm-hmm. I think also that that generative AI will get better and more sophisticated, so that the ability to discern what is kind of generated and what is not will shrink, so it won't all feel so automated or feel so kind of robotic in terms of the language and things. And I think also people will go through a period of learning. Creators and any good creator or big name creator, I'll be very surprised if they're extensively using generative AI to produce the bulk of all of their content, including the copy and all of the scripts and all of the images, they will be using it to augment what they're already doing. It will be used to supplement and time save and make them more productive and give them greater scope to do more things or to do what they're doing in a more sophisticated way. So, creating thumbnails, that's a pretty useful thing to have an AI generate something that's going to work really well for you, or being able to, the most useful thing that I use it for, and certainly other social media managers I work with use it for, is ideation, generating potential ideas, having an initial thought process about a piece of content you might want to go with, and then what other similar ideas or similar titles or kind of key points would we want to kind of include in the script or in the video or in the caption and stuff. So it's kind of a thing to sort of kickstart you, to start the process of coming up with something. And then, as I say, for some creators, they might be really good at creating video or creating images or doing certain aspects of the kind of end-to-end process, but there's bits where they're not. And at the moment, maybe they outsource that, or they have to pay somebody who's a skilled designer or a skilled editor. Generative AI will save that time and cost by doing some of those processes quicker, cheaper, and easier than having to do it in other ways we pay. So I think we're in a learning phase, a learning loop that will probably last some time. And I think in terms of the platforms themselves, one of the things that I think that is inhibiting people using generative AI, certainly for me it is getting it into my workflow and actually remembering it exists, it's there, and make it feel easy to click in and out of when I'm doing a million other things. Because at the moment I have to go to a separate tab, press a separate button, and then remember to do it and do a few extra steps to extract the value that generative AI gives. Once those things are more organic and native, shall I say, in the platform, so they're kind of part of Gmail, they're part of the LinkedIn when you're composing something, that the AI is just there, that will be when it becomes more valuable. And what we're seeing at the moment with the platforms, particularly, I think nearly all of them have got some sort of AI assistant or bots that's going to be added, or some sort of feature that kind of helps you come up with ideas or finesse what you're creating. We're going to see more and more of those built in. And I think the bot bit is what seems to be the most popular. You see Snapchat's got My AI bot. I think TikTok's got its own version of its, in-app bot you can ask questions of and get answers to some things that you want to know information about. And we'll see that across a wider range of apps in the coming year, I suspect.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I totally agree with you. I can see how much it's helping. Just one example could be for YouTubers that finally YouTube has the A/B testing, right, for thumbnails. That is, a big thing, right, because analytics are more and more important nowadays. So having just that you can, let's say, use an AI to generate 10 different images, thumbnails based on these inputs. Then you give it to the system, right, and that people basically, they are the one, right, clicking or not clicking, and based on that you can exponentially get more views thanks to generative AI plus the A/B testing on YouTube. So I absolutely agree that it's not removing things, but it's actually assisting you and helping you out to getting best results, from your idea to the execution.
Yeah, they're really useful for generating initial ideas, then kind of for creators to go away to kind of create their piece of content in whatever format it is, whether that's video or podcasted audio or whatever, blog posts, etc. And then using AI sort of the end of the process to kind of clean up the audio, remove the ums and ahs, and to kind of help chop up the best clips for it, to come up with the thumbnail that you might want to create that makes it really pop, and to kind of help you kind of come up with some ideas for how you might want to caption it to kind of bring in the most interest into it. But the general creative elements that make a creative, the things that we love about creators, or the most successful creators, are their original ideas, their original creative act that kind of brings about a really good podcast sort of discussion, or come up with a really cool narrative that fits into a nice video that goes on TikTok, whatever. That's the bit where the skill of an AI is very much still limited, and that's what requires the creator to deliver that. It's what makes the creator who they are, and what people kind of cling to and seek out. The other bits are, the AI is kind of helping to polish the edges of the work that they've done and give the creator more time to be creative.
And so if the AI is going up, right, it's the buzzword, everyone is talking about it, something that is not getting the hype that, used to have maybe last year is the Metaverse. So what is happening there? Was it just a big flop? Are people not ready for that yet? Is it a technical issue? Is it about how people approach the world? Do we want to be with a screen like that? We don't want that. Like, what is your opinion on that?
I think that nothing dramatic has changed or shifted since when Mark Zuckerberg and Meta kind of made a big splash about it. I think the difference, the issue that they had, and I've said this before, is that it was always going to be tricky launching or making a big sort of announcement about the metaverse and the future is the metaverse for the company, when by their own admission at that very early point, it's going to be 5, 10, 15 years before it will be mainstream and it will make sense to most people. How are you ever going to string along people for that period of time, drip, drip, drip information that keeps people excited and buzzed? Because eventually, like, come on, then where is this thing? You run out of steam. And I think in some ways, the fact that AI, generative AI, came along was a blessing for Meta, because it gave them something else to kind of talk about whilst they got on and carried on building what they planned to build. And I think that their plans and their ideas and their expectations for the metaverse haven't changed. It's just that they realize that there's not much to talk about all of the time. And so there's an impression, I suppose, that people have that maybe, it's not been successful and they're trying to distract. I don't think that's the case at all. I think, the technology to get people into whatever the metaverse is and is still quite some time away. To shrink down technology so small that it can fit on your face, it's not too hot and burns your face because batteries get warm, and the batteries that last long enough, you don't need to sort of charge every hour, and then high enough definition lenses which aren't ridiculously large but are small enough that can kind of give you the reality that you need it to sort of feel real. And then to have the ecosystem of developers and creators building apps and features for these things as well as all of the other technological challenges. That's still a work in progress for any company. Even Apple, its first attempt at it with Apple Vision, which will be out later this year. There's still lots there that needs to be improved before it will become mainstream, predominantly for that price. Most people are not going to pay $1,000 kind of dollars, £1,000, let alone $3,500, which is what Apple Vision will be. So I think the metaverse for most companies, 99% of companies in the world, is something that A, most people don't really understand what it means at this point, and B, is too far away to need a level of attention or focus. Your time and attention is far better spent on things like generative AI, like what's happening with Threads and what's going to happen with TikTok next. And it's only companies like Disney and Red Bull and kind of mega companies that have got huge budgets can experiment and kind of prepare for what they might want to do in whatever the metaverse is. But for the rest of us, I think it's a wait and see for the time being.
No, yeah, I can see that. Even just as you said before, like the number of devices that are out there, maybe there are like a few millions, if I'm correct. Like we're not talking about more than that. So even just the people that can access to it is limited. Therefore, if you look at the funnel, at the end of the day, the people that are active on a single day, there are not that many. So maybe like an interesting concept, but ahead of its time, maybe.
I think it was just talked about too early. I think that the hype should have started years further down the line rather than when it did last year before, because there's not enough for people to show and experience in order for them to understand it. And I think the metaverse as a term for most people is hard to kind of wrap their head around. Everyone has a different understanding of what that means. I think once they have an experience of a metaverse kind of activity experience, whatever that might be, whether it is using AR or VR, once a more mainstream audience has that, it will start to slot in and people will start to realize why it could be something significant that will shift people from their mobile phones and the rectangle in their hands to something that may or may not end up being mounted as a pair of spectacles or something similar. But for the time being, it's too far in the future and too expensive and too limited for us to really understand what it might be.
And so if this is a more complex concept to understand, what it is way easier is personal messaging, right? And the private messaging, right? We've been seeing in the past years going from one to many, right? Just talking, more like way and just be like, I am the content creator, you just here to listen, to more discussions, right? And so I wanted to ask you, first of all, are you active in any either communities or private messaging groups? I'm talking about Discord servers, maybe WhatsApp groups and chats. Now with the new Instagram, also the broadcast channels and everything. like, are you active in that? Are you seeing any differences? Do you think that is going to be even more the future for social media, like going more private?
I like these things. So like, people have made criticisms that we've gone back to, taking a backward step in social media, and that, when early on in social media, people would complain that too many brands and too many individuals were broadcasting and not actually being social. And I think that there's a time and a place for being, creating communities where there is, a two-way community, that everyone's talking to everybody else and everyone has a say in the community and stuff. And I think there are great needs and potential for channels where it is one too many, a broadcast channel. And I started in the last year Geek Out Pro, which is a paid community based around WhatsApp's communities feature. So it has a one-to-many broadcast channel. So the main channel is a news alerts channel. So I recognize that certainly my audience, my following of social media professionals, were I just want to get all of the latest social media news. But I don't really want to have to use Twitter to do that because I'm not really a big Twitter user. And I want it to fit in with what else I'm doing on social. Can you get that information to me? Well, okay. So if I did a broadcast channel where you don't need to reply and engage, you can pin the group chat, private group chat to the top of your WhatsApp chat app, and then whenever there's a news alert, it'll be in there, and you can dip in and grab the news when you want. So for that use case, for me, it's been very powerful, particularly being in someone's WhatsApp chat channels. Having that's a pretty prime place to be, and a very personal space. So kind of. It's a great opportunity for whether it's a brand or someone like me, a creator, to build a community around that. And I've added then chat channels where people who do want to engage and want to have proper community chat between individuals in that space, they have a private chat groups as well. So we've seen that Meta's been particularly keen on this. They've launched Instagram channels, which is effectively the same as WhatsApp's community, and they've actually added a slightly different version of WhatsApp communities called WhatsApp's channels as well. So these broadcast channels are seeming very popular, certainly with younger audiences, according to Meta. In terms of private messaging in general, there is this continual shift from people not sharing as much. People do not share the same amount of content with as many people as they did 10 years ago. When we started out in social media, to my first kind of social media account I opened in 2007, I think. On Facebook, and then 2008 on Twitter. I, like many people, would share, I went to the dentist today, I'm having a coffee with my friends today. And really, it's quite cringe looking back at my first Facebook post. It's the most boring thread of things you'll ever read. But the point being that we all kind of suddenly had this euphoria. Oh my God, we can share anything to everybody and it's free and anyone in the world can see it. And this is like freedom of expression. That's amazing. But we had this whole period where in the last 10 years, we've had, scandals with data, and we've had people like concerns about privacy and people getting cancelled on Twitter and then realizing if we say something that maybe it'll ruin our job prospects, and a whole list of other kind of harassment and bullying and mental health concerns. And so over the years, we've sort of receded slightly, and we've like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't share so much with so many people, and maybe we, rather than sticking the whole world's population into one space and hoping that everyone will get on, which they clearly won't and they don't, and why would they? Let's find private spaces where people who are of like minds and have similar interests feel safer and secure talking, and people will share in those spaces because either it's ephemeral or because it's people they trust and they don't feel so open to attack. And that's where we are now. We've come down that kind of back end of the curve, and everyone's gone to this kind of, let's just keep it between us in communities. And that's why we're seeing, messaging apps, ephemeral content, private communities, group chats, all being far more popular. And the likes of Snapchat and Facebook and Instagram and others are like trying to find ways to encourage and get people sharing again by using different tools and features.
Absolutely. And, it's also interesting to see you can find things before they go public, right? So it's a good place where you can just listen in, right? And go through things. And again, they test things in niche communities, right? Before maybe going to the public. So I will always, been fascinated by what happens, let's say in the underground, right? Of social media before getting public. And Matt, is there anything else? We covered many topics today. Is there something that I didn't ask you, something that you're very excited about that you would like just to wrap up the episode?
No, I just think going full circle back to the whole Twitter and Threads thing, I think that space is going to be one to watch for certainly the next 3 to 6 months, because I think there's an expectation or a hope from some people, and maybe I'm one of those people, that Threads could displace Twitter and present a new opportunity for people who like Twitter to exit the platform and use something else. My gut feeling at the moment now, having 2-3 weeks of using Threads and seeing Twitter's response to it and seeing what Threads are doing, is that annoyingly, Twitter will remain relevant enough for people to need to still open the app who are already opening the app, but also a need to open Threads because there'll be enough activity and interest in Threads for it to survive. So I think that they will both coexist. I think Threads will take some of Twitter's traffic and some of Twitter's users and engagement away, but not enough to severely damage it, which probably for some people, particularly those in the industry, is the worst of all of the kind of scenarios that could have played out. But we will see if that's the way it goes.
Interesting take. I'm curious as well to see what happens. Only times will tell, I guess. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. Congratulations on everything that you built so far, your personal branding or your knowledge about social media, and for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thanks for having me.
This was the Influence Factor by the Influencer Marketing Factory, and I'll see you next week.